Hello everyone, it's Miss LaChance back again with our 5th Read Aloud video in this series where I am reading The Wild Robot Escapes by Peter Brown. Hopefully you are liking these videos so far. I'm having a lot of fun reading and filming these videos, and I feel like we're all back in the classroom together. Well, kind of. And it's kind of making me reminisce on all the books that we have read over the school year. Anyways, I'm just really enjoying these videos so far. In the last chapter we read, in chapter 20, called The Wild Animals, Roz was kind of just browsing along the farmland to see what she can find, and she actually found a dead deer in one of the fields. So what we should be thinking right now is, what kind of creature do you think would have done this? If it's a creature at all, okay? So be thinking about that as we go into our next chapters. Right now I'm going to read chapter 21 called The Howl, and then we will go ahead and proceed to the further chapters after this one. It wasn't long before Roz found more signs of trouble. Furry faces poking out from the bushes, musky smells lingering in the fields, silhouettes trotting through the moonlight. Ooh, that's a big wow word, silhouettes. What do you think that word means? If you've ever heard it before, go ahead and take a guess on what you think it means in that context. Silhouettes trotting through the moonlight, okay? And then if you have a dictionary by you, feel free to look up the word silhouettes. It's spelled S-I-L-H-O-U-E-T-T-E-S, if you're curious in looking it up for yourself. And then one night she heard it, the long, menacing howl of a wolf. Okay. All right, here's chapter 22. We have some lovely pictures of some wolves. As you can see, I'm super excited to see if Roz gets along with this gang of wolves, or if some trouble is coming about. So let's go ahead and find out. The attack happened at dusk. 7 beastly shapes bounded over the fence and into the pasture. Old Annabelle had wandered off from the herd, and now she made an easy target. Oh no. The herding machine saw the wolves coming and rolled in their direction, but the hunters were clever. They split up, darted past the clunky machine, and surrounded their target. The wolf pack was led by a large male. His name was Shadow, and it was easy to see why. He was a quick and quiet wolf and covered in dark fur, except for a long, pale scar that streaked across his body like a comet. Ooh, another example of figurative language. A long, pale scar that streaked across his body like a comet. And that is a simile, since it's using the words like or as. In this case, it uses the word like to compare a scar on the wolf's body to a comet. Shadow locked eyes with the cow, distracting her with his fierce gaze. And when his pack was in position, he said, "Attack!" The wolves lunged, snapping their jaws at the cow's skinny legs. Annabelle kicked and hollered, "Stay away from me, you brutes!" She was a big animal, but the wolves knew what to do. They kept biting her, kept taunting her, and kept wearing her down. The herd watched from afar. They cried out to their friend. They wanted to help, but they were too frightened to move. Well, reader, you can guess who came to the rescue. Footsteps thundered across the pasture, and Roz leaped into the fight. Had she swung her fists or kicked her feet, the wolf pack might have fled, but the robot wasn't programmed to be violent. All she could do was awkwardly defend the cow. Roz felt teeth chomping her arm. She felt claws slashing her chest. Her pain sensors flared and she howled, "Leave us alone!" The robot's booming voice startled the wolves, and in that instant, she pried one of them away. Then Annabelle landed a hard kick, and another wolf tumbled backward into the grass. More help was coming. The other cows had finally found their courage, and the angry herd was on the march. The wolves had missed their chance. Shadow gave a frustrated grunt, and the pack retreated. They dashed through the pasture, leaped over the fence, and disappeared into the trees. The robot activated her headlights, and shafts of light beamed out from her eyes. While the herd crowded around, Roz carefully examined Annabelle's injuries. "I need to clean and dress these bite wounds," said the robot, "but you will be okay." "Of course I'll be okay," the cow panted. "I'm old, but I'm feisty. Those wolves don't scare me." Annabelle talked tough, but there was no mistaking the fear in her eyes. All the cows were afraid. They knew that if the wolves attacked again, their next victim might not be so fortunate. So we got our answer. Roz did find herself in some trouble with the wolves. So let's see if they come back in a future chapter. I hope not, but as we know, the way that books tend to go, this might be a foreshadow of what's to come. The next chapter is called Chapter 23, The Rifle. The wolves returned the very next morning. Shortly after dawn, they leaped from the trees and started chasing a poor calf through the pasture. So the wolves are back. Roz managed to drive them off, but that night they returned again. The herd kept stampeding into the barn as the wolves laughed and trotted back to the fields. The cows were in shock. They refused to leave the barn. If this continued, the herd would produce less milk, the farm would lose money, and Mr. Sharif would send Roz back to the factory. Something had to be done. Knock, knock, knock. The dog barked and the children opened the door. "How'd you get all those scrapes?" said Jaya. "Is everything okay?" said Jad. "I must speak with your father," said Roz. Mr. Sharif came to the door and Roz explained the problem. At the first mention of wolves, he sent his children to their rooms, but the dog stayed. Oscar had no idea what the man and the robot were discussing, and his tail happily wagged as he stood beside them. However, his tail stopped wagging when Mr. Sharif handed Roz a rifle. The dog had seen the rifle in action, and it frightened him to his core. He scurried into the bushes and hid there, whimpering while the conversation went on. "What do you mean you can't fire a rifle?" the man yelled. "Roz, you're a farmer now, and sometimes farmers have to kill animals." It was the first time Mr. Sharif had ever yelled at Roz. She waited patiently as words and spittle flew from his mouth. "My farm and my family are in danger. Roz, I order you to kill those wolves." "I cannot follow that order because I am not programmed to be violent." Mr. Sharif let out a heavy sigh. He knew Roz was right, but when he reached for the weapon, she wouldn't let go. The man stared at the robot. The robot stared at the dog. The dog stared at the rifle. Oscar was still whimpering and hiding in the bushes. Just the sight of the rifle had sent him into a panic. It was hard to believe that such a fearful animal was related to wolves. But dogs are related to wolves, thought the robot, and her computer brain began buzzing with activity. She thought of dogs and wolves and rifles. She thought of Shadow, the wolf leader, and the long, straight scar on his side. And then she had an idea. "Although I cannot fire the rifle," said Roz, "I believe it can help me solve the wolf problem." Mr. Sharif frowned. He didn't know what the robot was getting at, but he was happy to let her handle the wolves by herself. "Fine, try it your way," he said. "Just don't lose any cows or else we might have to lose a robot too." All right. Now, chapter 24 is called The Bluff. You might not have heard that word bluff before. So if you would like to take a guess of what it means in the comment section below, you may go ahead and do that now. Otherwise, we're just going to go ahead and dive right into the chapter and hopefully get some clarification on what that word bluff means. And here, if you didn't see on this chapter page, we do have, it looks like it's a hill of grass, and in the hill you can see two little eyes, or it looks like eyes, circles that are peering out of the grass. Let's dive right into chapter 24. The cows peered out from the barn at Roz. The robot was holding the rifle. She carried it to the far side of the pasture and placed it by her feet. Then she began coating herself with mud and grass and probably a little cow dung. When every inch of her body was concealed, she nestled down into the ground and became part of the landscape, an ordinary clump of grass. So just in the first book of the series, The Wild Robot, in this second book, The Wild Robot Escapes, Roz seems to be using this strategy of camouflaging herself to go ahead with this plan that she is conspiring. The cows were stunned. What's Roz doing? Is she all right? Where did she go? Roz had learned to camouflage herself back on the island, and now she was using that trick once again. She sat motionless for hours, waiting for the wolves to appear. Daylight faded, the stars came out, the moon climbed into the sky, but the wolves didn't show, so Roz tried something new. The robot was an excellent mimic, and she began crying out in a sad voice of a wounded calf. So that word mimic, if you're mimicking someone, it means kind of pretending to sound like or pretending to be like somebody else. "Please help me," she cried. "I have hurt my leg and I cannot move." Crickets chirped. "Please help me." An owl hooted. "I cannot move." The calf's voice continued crying out. Finally, as the moon dipped behind the trees, 7 wolves slunk into the pasture. Shadow led the way, silently stalking through the night. Covered in dark fur, he was practically invisible. Only his long, pale scar gave him away. Noses sniffed, eyes searched, ears listened. Then a clump of grass began rustling. "There," whispered Shadow. "The calf is hiding in that tall grass." "Something feels wrong to me, Shadow," said a female wolf. "This is too easy." "I make the decisions, Barb," snapped the wolf leader. "Slash, lurk, fang, circle around and wait for my signal." 3 wolves dashed off. When they were in position, Shadow gave the signal, and his pack closed in on the wounded calf. With each step, the grass rustled more and more until the ground seemed to be moving. And then the ground really was moving. Grass and dirt crumbled aside, and there was the robot standing tall, pointing the rifle at the wolf leader. The pack froze. "Hello, Shadow," growled the robot. "My name is Roz. I see from your scar that you are familiar with rifles. You have been shot at before. You know what will happen if I pull this trigger." Reader, you and I are well aware that our robot was not programmed to be violent. Roz couldn't have pulled that trigger if she wanted to, but she didn't want to. She was bluffing. There's that word again, bluffing. What do you think it means in this context? She was bluffing. Of course, Shadow didn't know any of this. As far as the wolf knew, he was defeated. And so he did what wolves do when they're defeated. He laid down and he cowered before the robot. For the first time anyone could recall, the wolf leader looked weak. "I do not want to hurt any wolves," Roz continued, "but if you return to this farm, I will have no choice. Now please leave and never come back." Shadow scrambled away with his tail between his legs. Barb was close behind him, followed by the other wolves, and soon the entire pack had disappeared into the night. I really liked that chapter, my friends. I really liked how Roz is insisting that she's not a violent robot. She does not want to pull this trigger, but she's still using this rifle to prove to the wolves that she'll have to use it if they come back. She's just trying to protect the people on the farm, and she's just trying to protect the animals that are on the farm as well. Okay, kind of like she was doing back on the island where she was protecting her friends and family there. All right, so chapter 25, this is the last chapter that we're going to be looking at today. It's called The Summer. Very fitting for the time that we're in right now. We're all in summer. So let's go ahead and get started. Spring melted into summer, and the wolves were nowhere to be seen. That's a good thing. Perhaps Roz had scared off the pack for good, or perhaps the heat was keeping them away. You see, it was the hottest time of the year on the farm. The sun was scorching, the fields were baking, the pond was drying up, and foul odors were floating all throughout the dairy. During dry spells, the farm's powerful sprayers were activated. Water shot out in long, misty arcs, and the land turned deeper shades of green. When the hayfields were lush and ready to be harvested, Roz fired up the mower and the baler. The giant machines rolled out of the shed and down the long driveway. Shortly after, they rolled back in, leaving bales of hay strewn across the stubby fields. The cows and the humans spent hot days indoors. Only when the sun set and the air began to cool would they venture outside. The herd strolled out to graze under the stars. The children ran out to chase fireflies, and sometimes even Mr. Sharif stepped out to stretch his stiff legs. Trees swished in the evening breeze. Heat lightning flickered on the horizon. Cicadas sang their summer songs. When Roz wasn't farming, she was searching for a way to escape. Everything hinged on the children. The robot needed their help, but she just couldn't bring herself to tell them the truth. It was still too risky. Mr. Sharif asked the children not to distract Roz from her work, but they did it anyway. They'd sneak out of the house and order the robot to play with them. Together they told stories, rode bicycles, lay in the grass, watching fluffy clouds drift by. Summer was tornado season. On occasion, thick clouds would start funneling downward, reaching for the ground. So far, the funnel clouds had all receded back into the sky before doing any damage. But it was only a matter of time before a tornado touched down. Okay, and that is a foreshadow to the next chapter we will be diving into in the next video called The Tornado. Okay, hopefully Roz will be able to use her robotic instincts to survive this storm. She has dealt with so many storms in the previous book, as we all know. So hopefully she will be able to help others survive this storm as well. All right, my friends, that concludes this video. We just finished chapter 25. In the next read aloud video, I will be reading chapters 26 through 30. Okay, and I cannot wait to dive back into this book, and I hope you're all enjoying them, the read aloud so far, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, friends.